Hello and welcome to the Scoutcast. My name is Joe.
And my name is Seb.
And I'm Tom.
Welcome everyone. Welcome Seb and welcome Tom. So it's a bit of a welcome back for Tom. Viewers will have seen him last on our Meet the Manager series, and that is because Tom has quite a stellar career so far, never finishing outside the top 36k in 14 seasons. So that's pretty impressive. Multiple high finishes during that time, currently in the top 5k and in our live Hall of Fame too. So I'll put that up here. So we've been seeing, we've got Fabio, who does a lot of articles on our site. He's top, and this is an amalgamation of all the different season finishes here. So this shows Tom as second there, doing ever so well. And Darren Wiles, who's also been on Meet the Manager, is sixth there. So we've hopefully we'll be able to interview all of them at some point. That would be fantastic. Welcome back, Tom. Welcome.
A manager that not only has done well in the past, but is doing well this season. I'm very envious.
Yes. So Tom, welcome back. We will gather your views on a whole bunch of topics as well. But first of all, Seb, what is going on in the show tonight?
So we are going to take a look at players that could be called unfairly unfashionable. Those players we're maybe overlooking. Who are they? Why are we overlooking them? Are there some opportunities to be gained there? We saw Vidra return at the weekend, and he's returned before as well. Mason Mount in real life football. I think people are really coming around to the idea of him, but is he also an FPL option? And then West Brom as well, just as a team. Maybe there's some assets to look at there. We've seen them just turn over quite a decent Southampton side, dare I say, or at least we didn't expect that. We also, of course, are going to look at Tottenham Hotspur with their double coming up. We know Jose Mourinho is still the manager, although maybe we can look into if that's changed anything, if they're playing for him or not. And questions next 4 fixtures. I think he can pick one that can push me up about 150k places would be real nice. But first, Joe, I think we're going to have a look at our game week so far this week.
Yes, indeed. So quickly, we'll run through what we've been doing in game week 31. So Tom and myself wildcarded. So Tom goes first. We've got 68 points. I'll just run through your team for the benefit of our podcast listeners. You've got Mendy, Rudiger, Alexander-Arnold, Holding, also Salah, Jota, Fernandes, Son. And then on your bench, Alonso, who presumably was in your team, and then you got Shaw and Rafinha as well as Forster. So tell us about you. You must be pretty pleased with your wild card.
Yeah, I was pretty happy. I mean, often when you do the wild card, you end up with a worse score than the week before. So yeah, overall pretty happy with 68. I guess Trent came in pretty well for me. Like that one. Salah, pleased with that. And then Iniacho, obviously big points there as well. The only omission here is, I guess, Lingard, which I decided to go with Rafinha on wildcard. Mm-hmm. But at least I did get a return from Chris Wood.
Yes, indeed. So you got Chris Wood in. I got Chris Wood in as well. And he sort of prompted a bit of a discussion we've got coming up about perhaps unfairly unfashionable players. I know that he and Vidra were touted by some, but laughed at by many. So it's quite good that they brought the points in. Here's my team. So I got 63, freshly wild-carded. Got Mendy, Connor Cody, who came in for Alonso, Phillips, Shaw, Salah, who I captained, Lingard, Jota, Fernandes, and up front Kane, Chris Wood, the great Chris Wood, and Iheanacho. And then on my bench, Son, and it was between Son and Lingard, believe it or not. So I feel quite pleased about that one. Alonso obviously didn't play, and then Veltman, he was my other cheap defender there. And Forster. So yeah, just before we came on air, I was just saying, it was one of those rare wild cards really, where I didn't think, I should have got so and so, or so and so was in my team, and then I took them out, and I'm pretty okay with all of them really. Maybe Rob Holding instead of Veltman, but much of a muchness really in terms of price and in terms of returns, and in terms of, in fact, I'll probably leave him on the bench quite a bit, even though Arsenal's fixtures are good. I
know last week. Sorry, Joe, I interrupted you. I think you're lagging a bit, so I might interrupt you at the end of your sentence.
Okay,
apologies. I know last week you were talking about whether you want to plan transfers for the future or build a wild card that will see you through a few weeks. It looks, correct me if I'm wrong, that you maybe went for a team that is more based on the immediacy. So do you have a few transfers in your mind for the future?
Well, no. I know that Southampton, Villa and Everton have double game weeks coming up, and so too Palace. I know I'll probably want to tap into Villa and Everton's double game week. I've got Forster there. I have a bench boost to play. So I tentatively probably want a mid-price striker to replace Chris Wood. So Chris Wood's a placeholder for me. And Veltman, Alonso, Cody, for example, could become others as well within Villa. So I'll be looking to bench boost around rubbish teams having the double game week, basically. And I say rubbish as in, they're not stellar fixtures. So I'm quite pleased. I'm quite pleased with that, because I don't really know what I was going to do. I did follow what both of you were saying. I mean, on Meet the Manager, and also last week on the Scoutcast, Seb was offering very similar to advice that Tom offered me, really, because I know Tom kept Rafinha and he was sort of saving himself a transfer he wanted to make down the line. And I know you were saying, Seb, with my draft wildcard, perhaps you need to think about what moves you might want to make, and you seem to be plotting a few moves. So I'm now at the move where I don't know what I want to do. I have no planned moves for next week, so I'm just going to see. I'm just going to see how it goes, really, and hopefully
nice position to be in.
Yeah, nice position to be in. So just see. I'm just waiting for those doubles, really, and I think the rest of the core team hopefully should be okay. I said Alonso could probably make a move. Rightio, let's move on to your team. 47, Seb. So this is a team that didn't wildcard, so it's not necessarily a surprise. So just for the benefit of those listening on the podcast version, you've got Martinez, Cancelo, Alexander-Arnold, Luka Dean, Shaw, Jota, Son, Rafinha, Gundogan, Watkins and Kane, and De Bruyne, Bamford and Ayling on your bench, as well as Pope as well. So you had to get some bench points coming in, Jota becoming your captain as well. So you didn't wildcard, so I suppose, were you expecting this, or...?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm hoping for a little bit more than that. I'm missing some key players, right? Lingard, you've got Salah in there, who was a good captain. I think both of you went for that. So I'm clearly missing some key players who both we expected to return points and then did return points, possibly even more than we expected. But I'm not too unhappy with the team. Like, looking at it, carrying it forward, I think it's okay. There's a few transfers to make. I made 2 transfers. I bought in Alexander-Arnold and Jota, who are obviously 2 very popular players on the wild card. Clearly, I should have brought in Lingard rather than Jota, but he's on the list, but so are a number of players. I think Alexander-Arnold's haul there probably saved me a little bit. Captain, vice captain could have gone a bit better, but yeah, building for the future. I wildcarded back in game week 24, and that cut my rank by a fair bit. To expect me to now fall behind people who are wildcarding now. Mm-hmm. It's just about whether I finish, and net up on those people at the end of the season.
Yes, of course. So next,
looking to keep KDB, Seb?
Yeah, so I have a love affair with KDB. I adore him. But both, just from just watching football point of view, I think he's possibly the best midfielder in the world. And I think he's possibly up there for the best midfielder in Premier League history. Not a slight on Gerrard, Lampard, Vieira, Keane, anyone like that. There are different players there. KDB has done it for slightly less time as well. And football's changed a bit. So I'd say he's in that group. He doesn't have to be better. I just think he's in that group. And then when we look at things like fantasy football, his stats are brilliant. I know maybe underperformed a bit this year, but the consistency I love as well. So even until recently, when he maybe became slightly more explosive, since he joined Man City, just that consistency of returns was beautiful. And he was typically a little bit undervalued, maybe. Was it the beginning of last season or the one before, where he was like 9.5 million? A lot of people avoided him. I went straight for him. So that perfect marriage of me loving a player and him looking like a good asset probably leads me to being slightly too fond of him. But yeah, he'll stay for now unless I desperately need Salah or something.
Yeah, it'd be the minutes, wouldn't it? That would be the issue.
Yeah,
maybe,
exactly, absolutely.
Okay, so before we move on to some of the topics, I've just got a couple of rough with the smooths. So a bit of a rough here. Gabenga got 35 points in his starting 11, but 38 on his bench. He had Dallas, Johnston, Watkins, and even Bale got him a point there. Or rather, didn't. So they stayed on his bench. 35 in his main team, 38 on his bench. In contrast, John, aka Guna FPL, he had Pope, Tierney and Diaz in his team, and Dallas, Holding and Johnston on his bench. Obviously, those 3 I mentioned at the start, didn't play. So all 3 came into his 11. 37 extra points on Monday night. What a hell of a Monday that was. And also, huge congratulations to Pandin Bryan, the leader of Fantasy Football Scouts Mini League, who is also the new world #1. And did it in style by playing a superb wildcard. 81 points there. Double-digit hauls from Captain Lingard, Lacazette and Alexander-Arnold, together with additional returns from Patricio, Son and Cody. Red Lightning, who informed me of this, I didn't actually notice this, so well done Pandy, but Red Lightning said you can't get smoother than that, and I don't think you can. Playing a wild card and then going straight to the top and becoming the current...
You know what I love about the Dallas points? A bit like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who anyone who got him like vice captain. Yeah. I love about it is it's that perfect mix of skill and luck where I think having Dallas on your bench, good fixtures to come, has performed well, holding on to him is a skillful move.
Yeah,
just like bringing in Alexander-Arnold is a skillful move, even giving him the captaincy because maybe he gets a clean sheet. But then the luck came into play because we did not expect Dallas to both come off the bench and score 2 goals, and we didn't expect Trent to score. We probably expected him to keep a clean sheet.
Yeah.
So it was that perfect marriage of like skillful managers getting lucky and getting a fair result, probably.
Definitely. If I'd have kept Dallas, he'd have definitely been on the bench. It just depends who was on the bench and who he would have replaced. But yeah, it would have been. There is an element of luck there, but yeah, I mean, that's you can always remember
it's
Dallas.
It's a bit of both, isn't it? Which is what fantasy football is about.
Yeah, definitely. Let's have a move on to some topics here. So I put up a tweet asking for some ideas from the community. And I was thinking about unfashionable players and why we laugh at them. There was an article on the Fantasy Premier League page about Vidra. And the responses of it, I hadn't seen it, but Andy shared it. And the responses were just laughing at him, just saying, you drunk? Vidra's, why are you recommending Vidra? But Vidra has been scoring goals and he scored again this week. So perhaps he had the last laugh. But it just made me think, one of the reasons why I picked Chris Wood was because previously I might have laughed at that. But why? And Chris Wood is a good striker in a team that's actually a bit more attacking now in Burnley. And there's a whole plenty of them. And I'm sure there's others out there who, for whatever reason, they're still perhaps having a laugh at Lingard. And unfairly, perhaps, because he's certainly making a mockery of that. So I asked people's views about which unfashionable players they've readily dismissed this season, despite promising formal stats. And I said I'd be reading out your unfairly unfashionable players. So here we go. So Kay Todorov, Shaw. Now this one I can echo. I saw him at the top of many stats tables at the beginning of the year and just dismissed it. I just thought he won't get the minutes. He's overweight. Whatever I was thinking. All completely wrong because he's still performing exceptionally well for Manchester United. Refused to get him in. So he's had 5 assists, a goal and 9 clean sheets, all for less than 5.5 million this season. Wow. Topping defenders' chance creation stats, Kay Todorov notices. Crate Digger says Rob Holding. He has a blind spot for dull defender picks, despite the budget Arsenal man seemingly nailed whenever David Luiz is injured. And registering 9 clean sheets and 8 bonus in his 22 starts. That's not bad for 4.2 million. Rocky Bamford earlier this season. Surely he couldn't continue his form. Well, he did. 6 goals in his first 6 matches and he's carried that on. He's currently on 162 points. Here's some others. Gundogan. How many of us, we took a while to work out Gundogan. Think he's a defensive midfielder. Why should I bother? Well, he happens to be their top scorer. So, who else? Mason Mount, Ian Walker, and Late Riser joined in as well. Mason Mount and Late Riser said Mason Mount wins this hands down, and he's got a point. 6 goals and 6 assists, all for 7.2 million. FPL Dude, she would be looking at relegation scrapping talisman, St Maximum. Newcastle players, people are laughing, but are they laughing when they start? When Sam Maximum can score. West Brom's Pereira, another one. And Zors asked a similar question. There's more as well. FPL Prophet was saying, I think possible big gains from the likes of Martinelli, Chambers, and a West Brom asset. So West Brom, again, unfairly unfashionable, perhaps. But it's whether he has the courage. So I've started to look at this more closely with my own decisions. Chris Wood is an example, and I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of this season, especially when I'm looking at perhaps an Everton defender, perhaps. I'm fairly fashionable, but if they've got a double game week and got a clean sheet this week against Brighton, depends what the fixtures are, of course. So I thought I'd come to both of you really and see which perhaps unfashionable players you've ignored, and why do you think you have ignored them, and why do people ignore certain players even when they deep down could be quite good? So Tom, I'll come to you first. Are there any players in mind this season where you just thought, oh, I'm not going to go for them, but they perhaps proved you wrong?
Sure, to begin with, possibly. Definitely, I did think that he probably wouldn't have the attacking returns that he's generated. So definitely him. Holding is one that I probably wouldn't have even thought of at the start of the season. I've had him twice now, done quite well. So I think over the season I have kind of tried to pick up on some of these that have done reasonably well. But some of these, the ones that you read out, sometimes it's to do with minutes as well. Maybe Lacazette. I personally would be concerned about the minutes that he plays.
Yeah,
I think he's a really good player, and that would be the reason why I wouldn't pick him. Equally, there might be other players that maybe the position or how frequently they play. So Jorginho again, really good value at 4.7. I guess he's really good if he's on the bench, but again, I'm not sure how often he'd actually be in your first team. You'd probably miss out on some of his points when he's there scoring his penalties. But yeah, and I did think about this overall, which sort of players do I maybe miss myself? And I'm not sure if it's to do with individuals, but I did think that maybe sometimes I'm in certain teams, in particular, maybe some of the weaker teams in the league. And so as an example, Newcastle, Callum Wilson, earlier in the season, he was scoring really well. His stats were good. I didn't really consider him. I was probably picking players like Bamford, players like Watkins instead, really probably because they were in a slightly better team, maybe slightly more attacking, when there's something to be said for a player that's the kind of focal point on penalties, the main man. And yeah, sometimes we don't think of those players, and I think we miss that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's
I think that's all very fair.
There was something. It was Apple Bonkers, who is a member of the FPL community. But it was something that he calls stigma players, is where people ignore them because they just can't get beyond past performances, reputations. And he was saying he suspects Lingard is a decent example of that to many. And he mentions ones in the past, Lovren, Bentner at Arsenal, which I just laugh then saying Bentner at Arsenal. But he has scored a few goals, and then Benteke is probably a current great example of that at Palace. Seb, what do you think about this sort of your relationship with unfairly unfashionable players, and what sort of goes through your mind when you dismiss such players?
I guess, very broadly, I probably have a better season when I'm quicker to identify these players than rather when I'm slower. And I think I've been slower this year. I think I've been slower to adapt to certain things this year, and I'm doing poorly. Last year, when I did better, I was early on Vardy, I was early on Ings, I had Maddison during the period when he was unpopular but returned points. It's about getting off those players as well as getting on them, and that's looking at the stats, looking how they're trending, watching them play as well. Tom mentioned minutes, so listening to things around football. Do we think someone's about to come in or about to leave our teams? And I know we often talk about differentials and maybe just look at things like price and percentage ownership. But if anything, the real differentials are these players that you can identify before other people. Now, naturally, of course, they may be lowly owned, or on the flip side, if you can identify a highly owned player that's dropping off these tables or starting to not look like themselves, that's probably where the real edge can be gained and where I think a lot of skill is found in a FPL. Yeah. And I was thinking about how I play FPL and like traps I'll fall into. I think there's a lot of traps that that our brains trick us into in wider life. Not just FPL. I've been thinking about this, and I think many people have probably read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which if anyone hasn't, I truly recommend it as like one book to read, which will help you think about not FPL, but just everything in life a little more differently. And that's the basis of that, very, very broadly, obviously there's a lot more to it, is that we have two systems of thinking. System one, which is quick and reactionary and does most of the thinking for us most of the time and is often very, very reliable, but it relies on biases and learned experiences and things like that. Whereas system two is our problem solving one. And I guess the best example of that is if I asked you what 2 times 2 is, you almost instinctively know the answer. You don't have to work it out. But if I asked you what 59 times 73 is, you have to work it out. And I saw your face there. Your eyebrows, right? You can see that like your brain has to switch into a different system. It doesn't just recall the answer. It doesn't instinctively know it. It has to start actually doing work. And work is hard. Our brains are inherently lazy because that's efficient, right? A really good example of this from the book is, I've got a question for you. So a bat and a ball cost £1.10 in total. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? And answer quickly.
I was looking at various things to do with the stream and internet connection at the time, so I'm just gonna guess at £2 because I didn't hear much of the figures.
£2. Nice. So it costs more than the total of both. So okay, fair enough. You were looking at something else. But for anyone at home, some people would nail that and awesome. A lot of people may well have said 10p. So if we say a bat and a ball costs £1.10, the bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Instinctively, you go, well, £1. Total is £1.10. Ball bat costs £1. Ball costs 10p. Job to good 'un. But that isn't £1 more than the ball. The actual answer is bat is £1.05 and the ball is 5p. And that's a really good example of our system one, the lazy side of our brain that normally does everyday life, just springing to action because it thinks it knows the answer. And to bring this back to FPL, I think we often do that with FPL, whether it's value, whether it's recency bias, whether there's any of those things that we fall back on that are really useful in everyday life. Like if I'm crossing the road, I don't want to think about what's going to happen and look right, look left, listen, watch for cars. I want to do that instinctively. If I see something out of the corner of my eye, I need to react. So that's brilliant for everyday life. But when it comes to slightly more complicated tasks like FPL, that lazy part of our brain can trick us into things like going for expensive players or going for things we're used to. Or dare I say, you mentioned Kevin De Bruyne earlier. Kevin De Bruyne has returned me points in the past. I like him as a player. I think he's good. I naturally go towards him because it's easy. I don't have to think too hard about it. We've seen this recently with someone like Lingard and XG and all that. XG can be a crutch we lean on. Maybe we rely on it too much. Or we don't like it. We don't want to think about it, so we reject it completely. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think you and David were talking about this earlier on the captaincy video. And I thought you made some brilliant points. And I think you said people misunderstand XG, whereas XG it's a really good, I really like it. All it does is describe the quality of a chance.
Exactly.
It does not say anything after the ball has been struck. So Lingard has great stats. He should be scoring points. He is scoring more points than his XG would say. But if we assume he's either getting lucky or finishing really well this season, XG won't tell us that. It cannot differentiate between the two. So it's important, like so many things, to maybe take a few more things into account, try and look a little bit wider. And I would say if there's anything personally myself I want to take away from playing FPL is to maybe when I feel myself leaning on something, question it, look elsewhere, talk to someone like Tom who's got a ridiculous history and maybe ask him what he does,
Yeah, so Tom, I mean, over the 14 seasons that you've had where you've never finished outside the top 36k, and even that mostly higher than that, there must be times over those 14 years where there's been players that that perhaps are laughed at by others, but you have got in order to steal a march on people. Have there been any examples of that, or have you just avoided those types of players?
Yeah, there must be cases, but I would say I'm fairly conservative with these, with players that maybe are a little bit unfashionable, especially ones that are maybe coming back from injury, going on loan to a different club. I generally like to see a player for 4 or 5 games before I'll kind of jump in there. So generally I'll try and, kind of have a good look at them, look at the stats and really kind of get quite a good confirmation that they're the player that I thought they were going to be before kind of jumping in. So I think that then helps as well to not use as many transfers, to not have to move players out, because there'll be as many failures as successes with these type of things.
Yeah, I think one difference, and we're going to come to something about, as a question much later about what we think has changed about the game. And obviously the array of content, people are watching this or listening to this, and there's all sorts of other podcasts and videos and articles by a whole range of people about Fantasy Premier League. So of course there's a lot of information out there, and that has been a big change. There was something that caught my eye in the live chat, which was something that Steve Elbows was saying. He says, I'm actually annoyed about how quick people are to pick up players with potential these days. He says it reduces my advantage, and I think he's right. So Lingard has been snapped up quicker than perhaps Lingard may have been snapped up in previous seasons when he was a bit more of a joke and not scoring lots of goals. And I think there is a case for that. I think people have moved on Iheanacho quite much more quickly than they perhaps might have done. And they might have just perceived him as won't get the minutes, won't get the goals. Vardy's the main man. Look at his price. Look at Vardy's price. Vardy must be better. But I do think that he's got a point there. I think people are moving. So we all, as FPL managers, have greater competition from other FPL managers. There's more of them, and the quality of them. It's a bit like XG. Is there an XFPL metric to measure them? Because it's the quality of the managers.
Is it live FPL or someone does something like that? They try and account for luck. I mean, I think it does a decent job. It's probably a work in progress, but it does an okay job of looking at what maybe is luck and what was an expected result.
Yes,
the FPL review does that as well, doesn't it?
Oh, is it? It might be FPL review,
yeah. So so it's quite interesting, and I think hopefully if there's a takeaway to get from this, it's there are certain players that you might look at stats and they appear on stats tables. You might see them score once. You might see them come on and be a super sub, but then some part of your brain, as Seb was talking about, dismisses it. But then I think the takeaway from this is, are we being unfair to do that? Should we perhaps just go for them? And that's what I've done with Chris Wood. So I've tentatively dipped my toe in laughable players. I haven't gone full Vidra because I wanted to maintain a bit of value in that place, because there's the likes of Ollie Watkins I might want, and that's an easy move from Chris Wood. Vidra to Ollie Watkins, that's a chasm. And I think there are certain players. So I've done a list. I had a look at last 6 matches, and I looked at those who are top of those tables in terms of big chances, but I laughed at them. So if I didn't laugh, so for example with Kane, I didn't laugh. I thought Kane's always there, But if I just thought I'm not getting them, in they went. So I've done a list here. So I'll read out the names and give a bit of a stat, and then I'll get your views on them to see if perhaps they're being unfairly dismissed. Top, big chances, 6. Expected goal involvement, 3. Chances created, 4. 14 shots inside the box, 7 of those on target. It's Richarlison at Everton. Very, very lowly owned. What was his Richarlison? 8.8%. So less than 1 in 10 FPL managers own Richarlison. So any views on Richarlison? Why shouldn't we be getting him in his team? They've got a double coming up, and he's top of the big chances over the last 6.
Yeah, I quite like him, to be honest. I think the concern with Richarlison is if he's playing a little bit more out on the wing. If he's playing up front in the 2, then I quite like the value there. If he's out on the wing, he's not as involved. He's not likely to get as many goal-scoring opportunities. That would be the problem for me.
But I don't think he has been playing up front virtually. I think last 10. I can't remember when he was last on the wing.
I think there was one game where they went back to DCL up front, maybe about 2 or 3 games ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely been more up front recently, which is why I think Richarlison's a better option than before, and DCL has become a little bit worse than before.
Okay. Lacazette. Is it just me? I mean, am I being unfair putting Lacazette on there? Seb, what do you think? Lacazette, would you get it? Why isn't he in your team?
So I will happily admit that I hadn't really considered Lacazette until I looked at this earlier. And maybe he's a good example of one of these players. So firstly, I guess we all just think Aubameyang when we go to Arsenal, right? In our head, like we were saying a moment ago, the easy option is Aubameyang. I have learned that Arsenal do good, Aubameyang do good, so I pick Aubameyang. Yeah. So it's useful to look a bit further. But looking at Lacazette, in the last 6 matches, he has an expected goal involvement of 4.42. Mm-hmm. From that, he has no assists, but he has 5 goals, and he has an XG of 3.65. So it looks like, go back to the XG conversation, he's overachieving. But if we then look at his XG history, I won't run you through it all now, but every single season that we have numbers for, he has exceeded his XG. So it would be fair to say that he is a better than average finisher, and thus we would expect him to exceed his XG. If anything, exceeding his XG is about right for Lacazette. And if you look at the other stats as well, like shots on target and shots in the box, I believe in that same period, every single one of his shots has been in the box, which is 13 out of 13. So naturally, there are going to be better chances if he has a good shot accuracy and a good goal conversion as well. A bit like someone like Son, we might expect him to score more than we would expect.
I mean, 9 shots in the box,
I am considering
7 on target. I mean, I would have got him in my Sky team because it's the only opportunity you can do that in mid-game, midweek rather. When I knew that Aubameyang was off with the flu. But I didn't make that move. But nevertheless, I could have done. And I think if I'd have known Aubameyang was out on Friday when I was finishing my wild card, and knew that Lacazette was starting against Sheffield United, I'd have gone for that. So I'm probably being a bit unfair on him.
Yeah, I think for me, he's maybe a little bit too expensive as well. 8.3 when you've got all these other cheap options. You know, you've got obviously Iniesta right now. We were looking at Watkins, Bamford, Antonio before he got injured. There were a host of other options. That's kind of, I think, the stumbling block, and then also possibly the minutes come into it again. I
mean, Iheanacho isn't a secret anymore, but he's a brilliant one. He's outperforming Vardy in pretty much everything, including price. The only thing he doesn't have is penalties. And speaking of price, I guess that's probably one of the biggest crutches we lean on, especially in captaincy. And I do this all the time. If I've got KDB and Gundogan, let's assume their stats are identical or whatever, it doesn't matter. I will go to the more expensive option because more expensive players, in theory, are better. And at the beginning of the season, that might work quite well, unless someone's been mispriced, because they're priced based on their performance last season. So it's very easy to go, I don't need to look at all the numbers from last year. I just know that expensive players score points. But when we get to this stage of the season, the prices were set so long ago that, if anything, it can probably make us run in the wrong direction.
Next on the list, Jesus. Jesus at Manchester City. Now, obviously, you've got rotation worries there. Gundogan's still sitting in many teams. Cancelo is still sitting in many teams. Diaz, who was benched at the weekend, still in many teams. But Jesus, why not? I mean, he is on, what's his, 3%. That's tiny. Hardly anyone's got him. 5 big chances, expected to be involved in 4. He's had 4 goals in the last 6. He's created 8 chances, 10 shots inside the box, 5 of those on target. And the minutes per goal attempt in the box, 1 every 46 minutes. He should be in our thoughts. Perhaps, I mean, for me, he doesn't fit in money-wise, and that could be the main factor there. But I still think when people still belittle him.
I think if you're going to hold a Man City player, then you probably want to go for the cheaper options right now, unless it's maybe KDB where you think he's going to play most of the minutes. So, Gundogan, I can understand people keeping a player around, 5.5 million that they might have got him in for. When you're looking at 9.2 million and all the other options that you have up front, it kind of doesn't make sense to me.
No. And then we got our friends Chris Wood and Vidra there. One of the reasons I got Chris Wood in is because I've also got Lingard. And I think for Lingard's only tricky fixtures, Chris Wood rotates really well with West Ham. Burnley and West Ham have really good rotation. So I think those that have Vidra as well should take note of that. But yeah, as I said, when Vidra was recommended, the article was laughed off the screen, really unfairly. But yeah, I mean, Seb, are you tempted to dip your toe in Burnley?
Possibly not, just because I'm doing badly and making bad decisions, maybe. I've got Bamford, Kane and Watkins. Probably need to move one of those on. I wouldn't mind holding Bamford for better fixtures, although his stats have fallen off a cliff. Leeds better defensively, worse attacking. Bamford much worse. So probably get rid of him. I was earmarking Antonio originally, but obviously he got injured. So I want to see how he gets on. So there's a chance, but I feel like, again, speaking about, I haven't wildcarded, I maybe just have other priorities as well that aren't just maybe looking good right now, but allow me to do more things with the team. For example, Lingard, if I can, I probably need to grab him. If I'm getting a Burnley striker, I'm just delaying that journey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think for some of these, it's going to be to do with the makeup of your team and money, and basically, who you can fit in and who you want. For me, Chris Wood happened to fit that role that I wanted as well. But I've also picked them out just because people often laugh at people who don't have them in. And here's the next one, Danny Welbeck. I'm having a little smile myself. He's had 4 big chances last 6. Expected goal involvement 3. Scored a couple of goals. This is against Brighton, who don't score a lot, but he does. He's scoring for them. He's created 5 chances, and this is just from 3 starts. So perhaps people are looking at starts, but he's only 5.5. So I think perhaps, and then we look at Aaron Connolly as well. He's been in a lot of injuries. When he plays, though, he does all right. 4 big chances in his last 4 starts. Expected to be involved in nearly 3 goals. He's actually scored a goal, created a chance as well. So 11 shots inside the box. Little Aaron Connolly. 5.2. Worth a go. But I think, I wonder if people think, everyone in my mini league will laugh at me when they see Connolly and Welbeck in there. I know that, I'm sure they'll have it in the live chat now. But the stats say these are pretty good guys and they're good value. But and here's another name here, Dwight Gale. 4 big chances, expected goal involvement, nearly 3. 3 chances created, 5 shots on target, 10 inside the box. He's 5.9 in a Newcastle side that we have seen are battling for their survival and may even survive. And they're going to need Dwight Gale coming on in the last 20 minutes to score a crazy brace, and everyone's saying, everyone got their jammy, the 0. whatever it is % of managers who've got him got his jammy points. Well, look at these tables. Dwight Gale should be in the conversation, but he's not. But yeah, I can't tempt either of you by Dwight Gale, can
I? I wonder if with those players, just the end of the list there, do we think maybe those are the players that, while they could have good stats, are the other end of the scale when we're talking about our Lingards and our Kanes? These are the ones that mean XG is an average because these guys consistently underperform it. Well, I think that obviously goes for their shots, their big chances, all the stats.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the likes of, say, but I put Havertz in here as well, which is, although people have been laughing at Havertz all season, and it's getting out of the mindset. So perhaps people know he's a good player. He's playing number 9 for Chelsea. They know it in their head, but they're also thinking, I got him in game week 2 and he was benched and then he got COVID and then didn't play. And I just wonder if that is eating away at some people.
That's such a good example. How often do we hear people say things like, I had him earlier in the season and he was bad for me, so never again.
Yes,
I completely understand that feeling. Yeah. But I'm not sure that's the correct way to play FPL.
No.
Havertz is a good option.
Yeah.
He's a good option.
I wildcarded and ignored him. He wasn't even in the conversation. Briefly, Mason Mount was in my team. Another player, very unfairly unfashionable. But Havertz there, yeah. I mean, I think part of my brain has switched off saying, no, ever since Drogba left, and ever since Costa almost got a yellow card and never did for his suspension, I've sort of just mentally avoided Chelsea number 9s. I briefly went for Timo Werner, and then I thought, I got burnt again. So I just haven't bothered. And
I think both Havertz and Werner are possibly quite sneaky options ahead of next year. Not necessarily this season, but they could be, Werner might become a midfielder, maybe, just maybe. They might get a little price drop. Their stats are actually okay when they play. They have good pedigree behind them. I don't know about you, Tom, but there must be players that at this stage of the season we're maybe earmarking to get a cheeky head start on.
Havertz is definitely one. At the end of the day, if he's playing up front for Chelsea, then you've got to be interested at somewhere. Even if he stays around 8 million, it's definitely a very possibly a good one.
Yeah, and I did some more digging around. Just West Brom players as well. They are, talking about fighting for something to fight for. They're really going for it. Pereira, an option. Callum Robinson, 5.2. They're posting good stats. They're getting actual returns, but you don't see them in any teams. I don't see any of these players. Any of the players I've mentioned there, I don't think I've seen any. I think I might have seen, there might be someone in one of my mini leagues who's had Lacazette. There might be someone. I mean, obviously Chris Wood. There's a few, but all of those names I mentioned, I haven't seen any of them. No Havertz's even. So
do you think we're at the stage of the season where we need to start picking players? I know we've spoken about Salah and Kane for the Golden Boot, but players who have something to play for, in inverted commas.
definitely, I definitely do, and I also do think that Golden Boot motivation. Salah and Kane are at it. They are going neck and neck. They want it, and they both know it. They're both egomaniacs, and I mean that in a nice way, because they're strikers, and I do want. And centre forwards at top teams are hired not because they're shrinking violets. They're hired because they're egomaniacs who want to score and get the Golden Boot every season, and that's what you want. And Kane and Salah are those. So yeah, definitely target those as premiums. And a lot of those other players mentioned, West Brom, are on my radar definitely. And I think, I mean, my league position is not great, my overall ranking, but I'm hoping for top 100k if I can get it. But if you're, say, 1 million or 500,000 or 700,000 or 2 million in the world, all of those players, why not get them in? No one's going to own them, and then you can dazzle your friends in the mini league and saying, I got Lacazette's hat-trick, I think you'll find, or I got Jesus, or I got Vidra's brace against Manchester United. Why not? Why not go for these players? I'm not keen on that. Go on, have a bit of fun kind of thing, because it's not, it's not necessarily fun just picking a player. but
there's a quote there. FPL is not fun.
FPL's not fun. It's more than that. But it's worthwhile just picking some of these players. Those in your mini leagues, and that's what we're talking about really. Those in your mini leagues probably won't get. They're avoiding, and you're stealing a march on them. And by the time they might get them, it's too late. Because the laughters
as well, Joe. I'd just say we're kind of at the time in the season where you get these kind of crazy results as well. So going for West Brom players, a few weeks back you just say no, but now you've seen the kind of the rising Pereira, so quite a lot of players like that, and you get this at around this time in the season you get some unusual results, and so suddenly picking a Fulham forward, a West Brom forward, Newcastle, if Callum Wilson comes back, he could be good. You get some really strange ones, so it's worth considering that when you're planning your last kind of fixture, the last transfers.
Yeah, definitely.
As a man who never finished outside the top 36k, would you say, I mean, that typically is going to put you in a position to defend leagues, right? Whether it's a mini league or whether it's an overall rank. But then that's relative. If you've never finished outside the top 36k, but you're 25k, for you that's relatively poor. You might want to attack the end of the season. How do you find you normally approach this stage of the season, considering you're probably always leading most people?
Yeah, I find at this point in the season, I kind of enjoy it a bit more. I think you know the players that are fairly good. You've already got a kind of solid base to your team. But I quite enjoy this point in the season being able to attack the fixtures, being able to really attack certain teams. So like we've already discussed, the ones that are going for the Golden Boot, the ones that are going for Europe, the ones that are really fighting for their lives to avoid relegation. And you can really, identify 3 or 4 games, in terms of fixtures that you really might want to go after a player for. So that's kind of how I approach things.
Yeah, good, wise words there. Well, I mean, as well as we've got all these unfashionable picks, I mean, we've got matters at hand coming up. Game week 32, and it's a double game week. But I think I said in my notes, it's good news, double game week. Bad news, Jose Mourinho is the manager of the team in question. Seb, Spurs, do you want to take us through that?
Sure. Well, as we know, they have a double coming up against Everton and Southampton. I won't go into too much detail on Everton Southampton. You and David covered it beautifully earlier in the captain video about the teams they're facing. So maybe let's have a little look at Spurs. I think most people know Spurs fairly well by now. There's probably 2 players you should pick. Maybe there's a third risky one in there earlier this season. In the season, maybe it was a defender. But we have some questions on the topic as well. Jules asks, is Kane in game week 32 the best use of the triple captainship, or could there be a better time? FPL Geordie and Stoichkov wonders whether it's worth saving the triple captain until future doubles. So a similar question. FPL Raf, is Son and Kane enough? Do we need a third Spurs asset? And then which one? And Dunas Dog, with Spurs playing 2 games this week, and then in the final of the League Cup on the 25th of April, is there a danger of rotation as Mourinho will go all out to win a trophy And therefore, are we wrong to not consider other single game week players? Goodness me, a mouthful. And as you covered again earlier in the captain video, we're looking at maybe Salah versus Leeds, Lingard versus Newcastle, Leicester players, West Brom players even. So what I've done then is have a little look at Tottenham. There won't be anything too new here, and I'll be brief because I spoke far too long earlier on a non-football topic almost. But if we look at Tottenham over the season and the last 6 in general, the last 6 being Man United at home, Newcastle away, Villa away, Arsenal away, Crystal Palace at home, and Fulham away, so decent enough fixtures. The season total, they've got 52 goals from an XG of 42.3, which puts them 11th in the league for XG. And they've got 35 goals conceded from 40 XGC, expected goals conceded, which also puts them 11th. So pretty much bang mid-table, but overperforming both of those. Not necessarily to a ridiculous level, especially goals conceded, and we know Mourinho likes that. Goals scored, maybe a slight overperformance, but hey, there's Kane and Son, so maybe not. In the last 6, however, they've got 11 goals, just under 10 XG, which puts them 3rd for XG, so a massive improvement. And then 8 goals conceded from an expected goals conceded of 9.5, which puts them 15th. So the defence possibly has got a little worse, and their goal scoring has actually got quite a bit better, which looking at the stats is possibly not what I expected to see when watching them play. But maybe that's my bias, just thinking Mourinho, and it's not going that well. So to then have a look at the players involved in that, Harry Kane and Son, the obvious ones here, of course. For the whole season, Kane's got 32 goal involvement, so 19 goals and 13 assists. The ridiculous one there. And I had to check if this was right, and I'm still not convinced. Kane has 13 assists from 3.3 expected assists, which is ridiculous. I mean, we know, him and Son had that crazy relationship earlier in the season, but that's absolutely ridiculous. In the last 6, he's got 2 assists from 1.17, so still almost double, but maybe sustainable, whereas the first number is nuts. What do you make of that?
I think looking at Spurs stats across the season and differing form, one of the things that came out, I know it's come out when Ted has been on the show with his graphs about big chances and small chances. Son is really good at getting goals from a limited amount of big chances. He really takes those big chances as well. So he is not just snatching at goals, he is offered a big chance, he takes it, he scores from that. So what you might be seeing from those stats with those incredible assists from Kane, so Kane is that's not expected to be an assist. He delivers a ball, it's not expected to be an assist, but Son just weaves some kind of magic and suddenly it's in. And Son really wasn't expected to have scored that, but his sheer brilliance and skill did, which is possibly why we're seeing the same with Lingard at the moment. One of his goals at the weekend, I don't know how he scored it. It seemed to be on a sort of a volley, and it.
Oh yeah,
and it was
kind of a miskick.
It was kind of a miskick,
a little bit.
It hit the ground, and it was pinpoint into the corner from nowhere. Absolutely nowhere.
Worth noting on Lingard's second goal, basically to tap in an open net. I think on some models, the XG for that came out at under 0.5, which possibly is an issue with the model, not the fact that he shouldn't have scored it, because possibly it doesn't take goalkeeper position or defender position into account, because that was easier than a penalty, really. But so, of course, another thing on XG, you need to know which model you're looking at.
Those looking at the stats we got up on the screen, these are last 4 matches, and this shows perhaps why they are bizarrely getting better at scoring goals, while Spurs don't look like they are, but they are, is because Kane is taking the mantle of scorer. And we've always talking about Son, he only needs a few big chances, but Kane has got that volume and the quality. He's got quantity and quality. So 17 goal attempts. That's huge. This is not the assist guy. This is the scoring guy. 17 goal attempts, 7 on target, 9 shots inside the box, and 4 big chances. And Son is way down there. So he's created 4 chances. Kane's created none, last 4. And Son has had 6 goal attempts. So he's right down on that goal attempts, really down. Higher on the chance creation. Kane's way down on chance creation, way up on shot volume and quality. And then you've got the also rans as well. The likes of Bale, Vinicius, Aurier, Ali. That's how far you've got to go down. But yeah.
So I was looking at the Son and Kane relationship and looking at the heat maps, and actually, if you compare Man United recently, Newcastle recently, to the fixtures earlier in the season, the heat maps for the 2 players aren't that different in terms of pattern, but the temperature, as it were, does change. Son a little bit wider, although actually, funnily enough, a little bit further forward. Kane quite a lot bit further forward, a few more touches central as well, which I think matches up with what we've seen in real life. Although important to note that actually they're not that dissimilar. So it's more about what they're doing with the ball. So I had a little look at what they are doing with the ball. You mentioned we know Kane has maybe gone from slight creator to goal scorer, and Son has made the opposite journey. In the last 6, Kane has scored 5 goals from an XG of 5.19, so pretty much bang on, just under. Harry Kane possibly should just overperform that. For the season, he's at 19 goals, 16 XG, so yeah, about right. His assists have dropped, as I mentioned. Son, obviously the interesting one. So 14 goals over the season from an XG of 8. So that doesn't even make up for Kane's assist. He's just assisting everyone everywhere. Or the model's a bit wrong. We'll have to have a look. But then in the last 6, Son 1 goal from 1 XG, 3 assists from 1.79 XA. But then in terms of chances created, he has created a chance every 45 minutes in the season as a whole, but every 33 minutes in the last 6. So a pretty big shift there. Also, he has 113 crosses in the season, which is about 4.52 per match. He only has 2.33 per match recently, so that's 14 crosses. And the success has fallen as well from 23% to 14%. So possibly a shift in how he's creating those chances. So maybe slightly better chances for Kane if we're seeing that reversion. Also, Kane then converting those chances. He has gone from a shot accuracy over the season, so shots on target of 38% to 44% in the last 6, and a goal conversion from 17% to 20%, and a minutes per chance from 22.7 to 21.2. So I would say Kane is getting even better, and we're seeing a shift in how those chances are being created. And then the last one, which I thought was really interesting, and I'm going to speculate a little bit on where it's come from. The season as a whole, Kane has had 24 headed chances, which is 0.77 per match. In the last 6 matches, now obviously small sample size, he's had 6 headed chances, which is 1 per match. So a statistically significant increase, although only a small sample. With Son actually reducing in those crosses as well, I wonder if we're seeing those from the fullbacks. So someone like Serge Aurier, although he's only got about 2.3, 2.5 XGI for the season, 0.65 of that, I think, comes in the last 6. So if you really need that third Spurs player, maybe have a look at who else is creating these chances for Kane, because it's not just Son.
And this takes us back to, why are you laughing at this player, Serge Aurier? I'm laughing, even thinking about the concept of him in my team. But he's had a big chance. He's 5.2 defender. Chances of clean sheets, 6 chances created, 4 shots inside the box, 7 goal attempts in total last 4. He could be our third Spurs player if we wanted one. Tom, what do you reckon? Are you going to captain Kane then? He looks all right, doesn't he?
Yeah, he looks all right. I mean, definitely he is playing further forward. I think that's clear, and I think the stats show that. Before, I think he was dropping more into the midfield, collecting the ball, and then Son was probably running over the top, and they were looking to get Son in. It feels a little bit now like Kane's right on the last man. He's definitely getting into the box for any crosses that come in, and Son's a little bit wider. So yes, definitely Kane will be my captain. If I was considering triple captainship, I would be playing it now. I don't see how you get much better option than this. There's obviously doubles to come, but what, you're going to captain Grealish if he comes back, maybe a DCL. I don't see how they're better than Kane. You're guaranteed 90 minutes twice. So
if we're thinking, obviously Kane, I'm not going to discourage anyone, and we're thinking if you've got a triple captaincy chip, this is probably a good time to use it, because Kane is in red hot form and he's nailed on. Son, the second best. And if we were to get a third one, who is it worth getting a third Spurs player? And if you did, which one would you get?
So the only thing I'd say is, obviously when we looked at those early numbers, their defence has got worse while their attack has improved a lot, both in terms of actual return and expected return. So maybe, unless you're going to get that assist from Aurier, it was 0.83 XGI, by the way. So, not huge, but he's playing 2 matches. Unless you're going to get that assist, maybe you can't bank on a clean sheet. So maybe look at Hugo Lloris. He has okay stats for the season. I think he's about 6th for expected goals prevented. So effectively in FPL, that will translate to number of saves he's making effectively. If they do keep a clean sheet and he makes a few saves, potentially. But then watching Lloris, I feel like he's prone to just letting one slip. That Greenwood one at the weekend. Now, to be fair, Greenwood, great finisher, massively over-exceeded his XG last season. He's underachieving this season, but really the sample is too small. I think if you actually watch him play football, his shots both have accuracy and power, which is an impressive combination. Never mind, he can do it off both feet. So maybe Lloris was caught a bit short, but it felt like one of those ones where you often say with Lloris that I wonder if he could have just saved it.
What do you reckon, Tom? Third one, Lloris, maybe? Are you going to bother?
I don't think I'm going to bother. If I was going to, I think I'd probably look more to their attack and maybe even Moura.
Yeah.
He's 6.6. He seems to be starting. Bale seems to be frozen out now. He's maybe an option. I know he assisted the goal at the weekend. Yeah, he seems decent value, but yeah, I probably won't bother.
When I was looking at Lucas Moura, just one last one on that I thought was interesting, is just to keep in with the theme with Spurs. He had something like, I think he's got 3 assists in the last 6 from like a 0.3 XA or something. So just to keep with that theme of Spurs consistently overperform their numbers, probably because they're giving it to Son and Kane. I was put off him at first, but hey, if he's going to be involved, if we think they're going to score, maybe. Yeah. I'm probably with you, Tom. It feels reaching.
Yeah, I'm not. I just wanted to bring in a couple of people in the live chat. How Jam asks, does Fantasy Football Scout look at the live chat? Yes, we do. So a couple of things that draw out. Historia Films Kenya, they'll be dancing in the streets of Historia Films Kenya tonight, fame, does Aurier with one of those shocked scream emojis, which is exactly what we were talking about. Players that we're laughing at, and perhaps that we might not be. So if Aurier gets a clean sheet, a goal, or a clean sheet, 2 assists over that double game week, he'll be laughing there. And the other one I just want to mention is Pro Evo Stevo. He says he's looking to get Kane and Moura for me. I just wanted to highlight that because I was playing Pro Evolution Soccer only today. Nice. Well done on your choice, your non-FIFA choice there, Steve.
So on Spurs, enough numbers. I've done that to death now. I would be interested in knowing from you, Tom, looking away from all of that, if we do pick a third Spurs player, or even, if we have 2 of them, you're probably going to have to keep them for a couple of weeks. Is that something that's attractive to you? They've got a blank, of course.
Yeah, the blank is obviously a problem. If you haven't got any other Man City players, it might be okay. If you've got 3, you could maybe take one out before the blank. They have got Sheffield United afterwards. Sheffield United, and I think it's Leeds. So they've got pretty good fixtures afterwards. So it's not too bad. Obviously, if you're getting someone cheap like Moura, 6.6, it's maybe okay. Most people have got so many other options in midfield right now. I'm not sure that they would opt to move to that.
Just before we move on to some further questions, I've got a picture about worst defences here. So this is last 4. Just to assess who are the latest whipping boys here. Sheffield United still up there, 17 big chances conceded. Absolutely horrible about all the metrics. If you've got a attacker playing against them, play them because they're Crystal Palace as well, just behind with 16. Then Southampton with 14. So Southampton are creeping up this table. They've gone up about 2 or 3 places in the last week or so. Each match they get a little bit worse, their defence, and they are playing Spurs. They are playing Kane, and likes of Son, and also, as you were pointing out, Moura could be a good third option. Aurier, if you want to do that emoji.
Did you and David mention earlier as well on Southampton that maybe because of the high line and the way they press, while they haven't conceded all that many shots, when they do, it tends to be a big chance. Yeah. And the thing we know about Spurs is they love those big chances.
Yeah, we know that Son is great at putting big chances away. We know that Kane is just getting the volume, quantity, quality as well. But the things I also want to draw out with this big chances conceded worst defences table, last 4, is that just behind Southampton is Burnley and then Tottenham. So Tottenham with 1 clean sheet in 4, they conceded 7, 11 big chances conceded. This perhaps says to me, no, I won't be getting Lloris. And if I was to be getting a defender, I want to get an attacking one, which is why if I was a certain type of manager, Aurier could be on my watch list there if I thought he was getting starts. But the other interesting thing was Everton. Just 6 big chances conceded. They conceded 5 goals, expected to have conceded 5. But basically, where are they? 6 big chances conceded. That's just 1 more than Manchester United, Brighton, a couple more than Leeds, Liverpool, and Chelsea and Man City are the best, conceding just 3 big chances. So that shows that the Everton game won't be as fun for those captaining Kane and Son as the Southampton game will be. So for me, I'm thinking I'll take what I can get from the Everton game, but it's the Southampton game. I want to be seeing big goals in those ones. So let's move on to some other questions. So let's have a look here. Andy DeWolf asks, can you update us on how you play the game? Has it changed this season, and what lessons have you learned? So I already highlighted something earlier. The simple maths of there's more people playing, and there's more people playing who know what they're doing. And as Steve Elbows was pointing out, what these people, who are these FPL managers who are just cotton on to these players that are emerging after a week and then just getting them in? Well, these are more and more engaged managers. So that's my answer to that. So Tom, what do you think has changed over the 14 seasons of excellence you've had?
I mean, this season obviously has been very much impacted by the whole COVID thing. So I think you've had to be a lot more adaptable this season. Probably have a lot better bench and yeah, be a bit better in terms of planning for the potential doubles and blanks that have come up. So I think in particular this season has been really, really hard compared to others. Yeah,
I mean, definitely this season. So that adaptability. So do you think there's, each season there's a change and it's just about getting onto that, whatever that sort of narrative of that season is? So for example, late riser we mentioned earlier, top 100 last season. He hasn't changed his policy, hasn't changed his strategy this season. This season he's having a much worse season. But that does not mean that he's a bad manager. It just means that the strategy's sort of not there. But do you think that we need to perhaps change our narrative each season to fit whatever that narrative is, that strategy, or just stick to your guns and just have fun playing the way you play it? I mean, I personally just stuck to my guns most seasons, but yeah, do you think we need to, I mean, like Tom, you were mentioning about COVID, we've had to change our narrative this season, but that won't be the same next season, the season after. But yeah, do you think we should change our narrative or just stick to playing your own game?
I generally try and stick to playing my own game, but I do think you have to adapt, and part of that's the players that are available, the prices, the just things that happen. You've got to be able to adapt to the different situations that come up. But yeah, the general kind of rules that you might have learned over years of doing certain things are normally applicable from season to season.
Yeah. And Seb, what do you think's changed over the years you've been playing?
Oh, I mean, I'm not gonna top Tom's answer, am I? But obviously adaptability, as you mentioned, is crucial. But for me personally, I've got like a 15 season history or something, but that goes back to when I was a teenager. So the classic excuse that everyone has, like, oh, don't count my early seasons. I was drunk and not paying attention, but so was everyone. So, it is what it is. I would possibly, not just myself, I would maybe point towards like consistency and variance are the interesting things for me in people's finishes. You look at Tom, like, don't believe he's won it, but he's always finished inside the top 36k. I would argue that's possibly harder to do consistently than, say, winning it one season and then even still having a good history, because that could just come down to, and when I say luck, I don't mean, oh, you've got away with that, you're a bad manager. I just mean there was a 50-50 call, or someone got injured after the deadline. Things outside of your control. That's probably the difference between winning it and not. So it's consistency I think we're shooting for. And as Tom mentioned, adaptability, every season offers us different things. If you can consistently finish high in different environments, I think that's possibly the main mark of it. For myself, I would say when I learn something, I learn it well, but sometimes I'm slow to it. So like if something changes in the way someone's playing or their numbers or when we're watching them, I maybe reject it at first and it'll take me a little while to come around to it. So I maybe do best when I don't do that, when I spot something and go with it and back it up and follow it.
Mitch asks, is it worth going for double Leicester attack? So I've got Iheanacho. I'm going to stick with Iheanacho, and I just don't like the look of Vardy at the moment, and I don't think he's worth that money. So that's my answer to that. Tom, what do you think? Double? Going to go double Leicester attack?
Yeah, so before I was thinking about doing that. I don't think I would now.
No.
I think if you've got Vardy, I think that's okay. I think they've got great fixtures, next four in particular. There's the potential there for him to really haul. So, I'll definitely stick. But if you haven't got Vardy, I would just stick with it in the show. That seems sensible now.
What about like Maddison, Tielemans even?
Maddison's an option. Maddison's looked good before he got injured, so I think Maddison would be on my radar.
I think he should be back. I mean, he was a naughty boy apparently, and a bunch of Leicester players weren't allowed to play because of their COVID transgressions. So it should be back. Seems to be over. But yeah, Seb, what about you? I mean, because you've got a number of players that perhaps are more expendable because your wild card was 5 or 6 weeks ago. So Leicester, as Tom pointed out, they've got 4 great fixtures. So are you tempted to really pile in on Leicester?
Yeah, I guess this is where I'm torn. Maybe a bit like a bit of an answer to the earlier question as well, where I just want to pick the players I think are going to score the most points, and I maybe want to throw out the idea that if this player scores more points, I will do better. But I don't actually think they'll score the most. But obviously, when you're lowly ranked, you maybe do have to take those gambles. So maybe that's something to think about. I don't know if Leicester's the one. If Maddison is back, we need to see how he's going to affect Vardy and Iheanacho. Iheanacho seems a pretty obvious pick. I don't know if you want both of them, like Tom said, at this moment in time at least.
Here's another one. Adash asks, and it's a similar theme. Could it pay off going for Lingard and Bowen for West Ham form? Antonio is absent still. Bowen could be on set pieces in the absence of Cresswell, but also he's playing up top there. So they are the two guys. If Lingard's going to score or assist, chances are Bowen's going to be the other person on the end of that. Once again, Tom, you tempted? I mean, you haven't got Lingard, so presumably you're going to get Lingard in, but are you tempted to go even further into West Ham?
I don't even know if I'm going to get Lingard at this point. I've got Rafinha there in a couple of games. Rafinha's fixtures turn. He has really good fixtures coming up. I'm feeling a little bit entrenched with my position on Lingard now as well. I haven't got him for so long. I think I may just see what happens. If I was going to get him, I'd probably have to get him for Newcastle, and that would cost me a hit. So I think it's unlikely at this point. But coming back to the question, I think I like both players. I'm not sure I'd get both. I don't think many people would have room in the midfield to get both of those players.
No, I think that's all about midfield room. If I did have the room though, it would be tempting because they have good fixtures. Yep. And that is the way that I'm a big fan of double ups ordinarily. When you get the scorer and the assister, I absolutely love that. It's my dream whenever that happens, but it's quite rare. Seb, were you tempted to do something like that?
Again, possibly not that one, although it's more tempting. I have neither, so it would be a more significant move to do it, and as Tom says, probably not in time for the best fixture in the next little while. But I would almost, the takeaway from that is more not necessarily getting those two players, but the lack of Antonio possibly hasn't hurt them. Their numbers against Leicester weren't ridiculous, but actually, if you then, when we were watching the match, we were doing it on Matchday Scoutcast, they almost didn't need to be. They took a couple of really good chances. Lingard obviously had a slightly more fortunate one, but the chances they created and the way they played was set up well to deal with Leicester. And I think David Moyes is good at that, right? Maybe poorer when he was at United, maybe trying to impress himself on the game. Better setting a team up to react, well-structured and using the quality of players at his disposal. We saw that, I would argue Bowen was even better than Lingard in that match, just in terms of watching them play. Both excellent, but Bowen did a great job. And the bit that I really, really liked was, I think it was the third goal. I think it would have been Bowen's goal, where Lingard got the pre-assist, I think. But Leicester were playing it around the back, and West Ham were just happily sat off, but almost with a front four in front of Leicester's midfield. And then as soon as the ball came into Iheanacho, who had to drop deep to come and get it, they sprung the trap on him. He took quite a poor touch. They took the ball off him, and about 3 or 4 passes later, it was in the back of the net. And it was just that waiting to set that pressing trap, executing it and turning it straight into a great opportunity. You don't need to do that 15 times a match. You just do it once and you create a really good opportunity.
Yeah. Final question here. Steve Finch, best budget midfield replacements for those who own injured Netos out for the season, and Saka, who is great if he plays, but will he play? And we've already mentioned a few there. I mean, you mentioned Rafinha has got good fixtures soon, not just yet, but soon. So he's one to bear in mind if you can bench a midfielder for a while. But also, obviously, Jota and Lingard are the main ones there. I mean, they were pretty high on my shopping list on my wild cards. I just think they were great value, and I think if you can get to those two from Neto or Saka But otherwise, a lot of those ones that we were laughing at, I mean, let's put it up again, the currently unfashionable players. I think this is the chance to go for your likes of Pereira, perhaps. I mean, there's a lot of ones in attack here, but perhaps move to a very cheap Jorginho. 4.7 was mentioned in this conversation as well. And for Chelsea got great fixtures. 4.7, you can bench them easily when they're bad fixtures, and you can invest that money in attack for one of these guys. Havertz, 8.2. If you can stretch up, go out even that further in midfield, there's lots of good options, I think, to be a bit different depending on where you are in the season. So, but either of you two, I mean, what would your be if you owned Neto or Saka and you wanted to move on? Where would you go now?
After you, Tom. After you.
Like you said, I think it depends on budget. I think if you can get Jota, Lingard, then that makes sense. If you haven't quite got enough for Lingard, then Bowen is within sight. And equally, if you have players on your, in your squad right now that you can get by for the next, I think it's 2 games, then Rafinha will then have a good kind of last 4 or 5 fixtures. So that's what I do.
And Seb?
I don't think I have anything further to add on that.
Okay, yeah. Well, these might give us some more ideas on those and more. We've got the next 4 fixtures. So we're looking at the season ticker. With Fantasy Football Scout season ticker, you can press a little button that says sort by difficulty. So I did that. And these are the ones, the easy ones at the top, tough ones at the bottom. So Wolves, Sheffield United. So who's going to play up front for Wolves for a start? So without Neto, not sure. But I'm very happy with Connor Cody still. So Sheffield United, Burnley at home, and then West Brom, Brighton. This is a nice run. Then Leicester, these great 4 fixtures. West Brom, Crystal Palace, Southampton, Newcastle. That's really good. So this is why people are talking about piling into Leicester a bit. Tottenham, yes, they have a blank, but they got this double, Everton, Southampton. And then Sheffield United, they come out of the double on that. That's why I'm thinking, well, I might as well just keep Son and Kane on my bench. 33, hey presto, 34. Both of them against Sheffield United. Worst defence, yes please. And then they have Leeds against Leeds on Gameweek 35. Arsenal still rocking. Fulham, Everton, Newcastle, West Brom. Sheffield United, I'm just going to dismiss them from an attacking point of view, but worth bearing in mind that Wolves, Brighton, Tottenham and Crystal Palace attackers face them. And then you've got Brighton. Brighton have actually got an okay fixtures. So I mentioned Welbeck, Connolly, these types of players. Trossard as well could be in the mix. So yes, they've got Chelsea next. But then they got Sheffield United, Leeds and Wolves. These are not bad fixtures for Brighton. Liverpool still going well. Only really Manchester United. The rest are great fixtures. Manchester United game week 34, but Newcastle, Leeds, Southampton around that. Manchester United themselves, Leeds, Liverpool again. That's the only bad fixture. Leeds, Burnley and Villa. It would be argued, and I think quite rightly, Leeds facing Man City did a number on them. But nevertheless, I still think there is goals to be had against Leeds. But Leeds could easily win. I mean, they are good. So I wouldn't say put them in the same bracket as Sheffield United or anything like that. And then West Ham, just a couple of... Well, one bad fixture really, Chelsea. Then they've got Newcastle and Burnley as well around that. And then right down the bottom, Southampton, Tottenham, nothing. Leicester, then Liverpool. That's just worse. That's awful. Crystal Palace, blank. Leicester, City, Sheffield United. So it gets a little bit better on 35. Worth pointing out, if they get a double in 35, Crystal Palace has still got a game to rearrange. So I don't know. I haven't consulted, as I said last week, I tend to switch off when people get too technical about the season ticker and potential permutations of when matches can be. But, there's one to monitor there. Same with Fulham. They've got terrible fixtures. Arsenal, blank, Chelsea. But then they play Burnley. Burnley are one of the worst defences at the moment. But either you two, any of these kind of spring any thoughts towards your coming moves over the next 4 weeks?
Leicester look great, obviously. Those 4 fixtures looked absolutely fantastic. Wolves, good fixtures. Without Neto, I'm not sure I'd want to invest at this point. If you've got Cody, then okay, you can probably hope for a couple of clean sheets there. But outside of that, I wouldn't be looking too much into it. Arsenal still got good fixtures. Obviously, Spurs, if you can deal with the blank and you haven't got maybe too many Man City players, then I think that's a good run as well. And then Liverpool still got nice fixtures as well.
Yeah, definitely. And Seb, what about you? I mean, because you've got City players. I know you've got Leeds players still, but obviously, as we said, the remaining fixtures after this block, Leeds suddenly go good. But Man City, still the threat of rotation, and fixture-wise, it's not great either.
I guess the only thing with fixtures on Man City is, of course, you'd prefer better fixtures, but at some point, a good fixture for Man City is basically everyone but Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, maybe.
Yeah.
Like they could conceivably do the business against anyone. And hey, I mean, if I was wildcarding, there's every chance I wouldn't have De Bruyne and or Gundogan.
Yeah.
I have them still because I haven't wildcarded, and maybe I do need to hold on to one of them at least to have that little differential, but I also believe could deliver me points. I think you mentioned there how maybe some fixtures change in 34, 35, around about that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to look at here. So the next four have been covered really well by yourselves, and I think we're all aware of that now. It's looking, and everyone's wildcarded for it, it's looking to what your wildcard might become in 4 weeks' time, especially with the potential double on the horizon. And then, as we mentioned earlier, targeting teams that maybe have things to play for or don't, targeting teams that maybe their fortunes have changed. We look at Leeds. The next couple of matches aren't great. There's Tottenham in there as well, but the last three are very nice. But our attacking impetus has probably gone down. The only player really holding up his numbers is Rafinha. If anything, when you watch us play, everything goes through Rafinha. So if we think he's going to score, he's probably the one. And then defensively for Leeds, while I still think, I captain KDB, lots of people captain Sterling, while I still think targeting us is an okay strategy, we are now, when I checked before the Man City game, we were 7th for defence in the last 6, whereas we were like 3rd worst for the season. So there's been a massive improvement. We have 2 fit centre-backs, and consistently, which we haven't had for a long time. Phillips is playing. We have tightened up a bit. Bamford's getting fewer chances. I think we're creating fewer, not just he's out of form. So maybe if you were targeting Leeds, it's not about just blanket targeting us. It's about targeting players that can still do well against us. So we saw City had 25 something shots, but only about 2 XG from that. And when you watched it, it was a couple of big chances and then Fernandinho shooting from range. So what you maybe want is someone who can convert big chances, but also is going to get the volume in. Because if we are happy to drop back a bit more than we did, or at least defend better, you're going to need good chances and lots of them. Someone like Harry Kane, someone like Bruno Fernandes, we do have them coming up. So maybe there's still a chance to captain those players.
Definitely. So Tom, it's going to be your turn to pick a differential this time. So last time, Karen picked Iheanacho, who scored a brace, and surprised us all that Iheanacho was so lowly owned. That won't be for long. Tom, best low owned gem, 5% or under ownership for the next 4 matches. Who is it?
So the one I'm thinking of is a little bit out there, fairly low ownership, 0.7%. Some people may have been burnt by him before as well, so kind of go with the topics that we've discussed already today. Ricardo Pereira. He's got Leicester, he's got West Brom, Palace, Southampton and Newcastle. 3 of the next 4 are at home. In the last game against West Ham, 35 final third touches. If you remember, he almost won a penalty as well. Mm-hmm. He was charging into the box. So I think there's a good opportunity there for him to get clean sheets and also maybe an attacking return. He hasn't really done too much going forward so far, but there's always that potential with him. So, that's my pick.
No, good.
I really like that.
Yeah, that is good, actually, because it's as we were talking about right at the beginning of the show about unfairly unfashionable players. Last season, he was fairly fashionable. But now, because he's been injured, because there's been so much competition within Leicester, because they've had to rearrange their formation depending on injuries. And Pereira's just found himself sort of struggling to come back into what we're thinking about. As you said, was it 0.7% ownership? Yeah. But then West Brom, Crystal Palace, Southampton, Newcastle. I mean, even if he doesn't get any attacking returns, it would not surprise me if he got 4 clean sheets. So
that is super tempting as a transfer, I guess. I mean, Leicester's defence, I had Ricardo Pereira a little while ago, before he got stopped off at half time with that injury. And I remember being disappointed. We're talking about remembering how past ownership earlier. I remember being disappointed that he didn't get me those clean sheets, and his attacking stats weren't quite up there. But I have no idea what his stats are like really now. But watching at the weekend, like you say, he should have got a penalty, and if he didn't get a penalty, he probably should have just scored that. He created a good chance from what I remember, and he's a long way up that pitch. Whether it's right back, right wing back, right mid, he is maybe starting to look a little more like the player before the injury. So you might have talked me into trying to get him in my team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good move. He would be an ideal replacement for those who have had enough of Alonso, for example. But Alonso didn't play in the Champions League midweek, which was taking place tonight, actually. So you would imagine he would play at the weekend, but he might not. That might be him out. They might have been so the Chelsea management might be so annoyed with him that might be the end of it. We might see Emerson come in. But Pereira is quite tempting. He's certainly a tempting replacement if you're in the market for a mid-price defender. Yeah, good call that. Let's move on to our teams for Gameweek 32 and our transfer and captaincy plans. So I'll go first. I've got I don't have any plans. I have no plans. So I've got Mendy, Shaw, Alonso, with Phillips at Leeds as my first sub if Alonso doesn't play, then Cody against Sheffield United. So I'm quite happy with that. And then I've got 3-5-2 of Fernandes, plays Burnley, Jota Leeds, Lingard against Newcastle, Salah obviously with Leeds, Son my vice captain, Everton Southampton, Iheanacho, and Kane my captain. And on my bench, Chris Wood first sub, and Phillips is my first defender sub, if you see what I mean, so it's my second sub, and then Veltman I've got there as well against Chelsea, so Forster against Tottenham. So I'm fairly happy with that. I'm okay if there's a couple of omissions, because Phillips for Liverpool, I'm quite happy to have him. Same with Wood there. So I'm probably going to avoid a third Spurs player, because I'm quite happy to go into 34 with Son and Kane and just bench them. And then I've got a bit of flexibility with who else I bench in game week 33, because I don't have any City. So that's me. Tom, let's have a look. Just for the benefit of those listening on the podcast, you've got quite a similar team to me, which makes me feel good. You've got Mendy, Alexander-Arnold, Rudiger, Alonso, Shaw in a 4-4-2 with Jota, Fernandes, Son, Salah, Iheanacho, Kane as your captain. You've got Rob Holding against Fulham, first sub, great first sub, Forster, Chris Wood and Rafinha. So good bench as well. You got any issues with that? Are you going to make any moves? Are you going to change it around, change the bench order at all?
At the moment, I feel quite happy with it. I've seen some people saying they're going to bench Alexander-Arnold. I'm not going to do that.
Never.
He's definitely going to play. So then really, like you say, it's Alonso. Is he going to play? Is he not? Holding's there to come in if he doesn't play, and it's just whether I decide that I've had enough of Alonso or not. Yeah. So I'll have a look at all the different games that are coming up and try to work out which games I think he might play. I think there's a decent chance he plays the next league game. I see he missed out against Porto. I don't know if he came on. There's obviously the cup final, the League Cup final in between, so that will have an impact, but I'm kind of hopeful that he will play against Brighton. Yeah. So I probably won't make any moves if that's the case.
Yeah, no, I think a similar position. I think other people who wildcarded might be in that. So Seb, you obviously wildcarded a while ago, so put your team up. So this might be more interesting than our ones in terms of moves. You've got Nick Pope, who is possibly still injured in goal. Alexander-Arnold, Shaw, Luke Dean, Cancelo, and then Jota, Rafinha, Son, De Bruyne as your vice captain, Gundogan, Kane up top in a 4-5-1. And on your bench you've got Watkins, Martinez, Bamford and Ayling. So yeah, I mean, it's not ideal fixture wise. So are you going to make any changes, or are you happy to leave it as it is?
I mean, I think there's a few things I need to fix, really. Like you say, it's not ideal because I didn't wildcard recently, so that's okay. I was actually wondering if maybe talking about how can I try and leverage the position I'm in now, maybe the fact that my team isn't ideal and isn't quite close to the wildcarders, maybe I steer into that. So I've got triple City, I've got double Spurs. I did have triple Spurs with Gareth Bale as well, and if I was wildcarding, I almost would have been tempted until he stopped playing, because I think maybe if that can be a slight difference maker in my team, and also the fact that, if I was wildcarding now, maybe I wouldn't go for them, but the fact I already have them, to get rid of them is a waste of transfers or even a waste of points. So maybe the cost of getting rid of them is greater than the moves I could make. So I'm tempted to maybe consider steering into the differences I already have in my team, which means that I've just got a few problems to solve, such as my goalkeeper situation. Neither are ideal, especially if they're injured. I was looking at Lloris, a double, okay fixtures, a blank, which Martinez covers nicely with West Brom. But as we said, actually, Lloris might look decent on paper, but end up returning me about as many points as Martinez anyway. If Pope's fit, I'm still tempted to get rid, just because, as we've seen, their defence isn't as good as it was, and Pope isn't making the same number of saves. He made 5 in his last match, but then it's all 3s, 2s, 1s, whereas we want, 5, 6, 7, 8 from him. So a decision to make. Obviously, I do like the idea of Ricardo Pereira, possibly João Cancelo in that move. Maybe I need to wait for the Champions League.
I like Martinez,
and then your own
actually.
captain.
I like Martinez against City for save
points.
Yeah,
it's quite possibly, especially if Pope doesn't play, if I don't make the goalkeeper transfer, it's a possible one. And then your own captaincy, obviously Kane, not going to try and argue with that. And vice captain is just on De Bruyne because I didn't want to stick it on Son for now, just in case something happens. We know how it is with captain and vice captain, two players from the same team.
Yeah, I know. I've got that tentatively, but I'm starting to think, should I do that then? Because Kane's he's gonna have to get minutes somewhere, isn't he? And that would be annoying if for some reason there's some COVID outbreak and the whole squad aren't playing and they have to get cancelled again. And then I will regret that. So realistically, I mean, famous last words, but realistically, it possibly doesn't matter who your vices are. Kane has got 2 fixtures. He probably plays 90 in both. If he doesn't play 90, he's playing minutes. So maybe it doesn't matter. But just for super caution, I'm possibly not sticking it on Son. Yeah, I think the only worst case scenario I can think of is similar to when he had a double game week 2 or 3 seasons ago around Christmas, where there was that famous picture of him looking like all snotty by his Christmas tree, I'm really fit, honest. And then he ended up playing like about 5 minutes of the whole double game week. That's probably your worst case scenario with him. So even with flu, he'll play.
But I mean, if Kane didn't play, do you want to captain Son in that case? Are Spurs actually worth looking at?
No, I think I would go for Salah or Fernandes.
I put it on Salah.
I think
put it on Salah as well.
Be Salah or Fernandes. That's why I went for Salah last week, the game week 31. It's just, he's just tried and tested. Just go for the golden boot guy, Salah or Kane.
What about Alexander-Arnold? Leeds attack not quite as good. Yes, still a good Leeds attack, but not quite as good. If we're going to concede set pieces, Alexander-Arnold takes those. His stats are up significantly. He looks okay. I think Salah's the obvious play, but if you wanted to go for Leeds and you wanted Liverpool, Alexander-Arnold maybe?
I'm of the Leighton Baines school of thought. Never captain, never bench. That's the way it is with me with Alexander-Arnold. But yeah, I would like, if I owned him, I would never bench him, no matter who's playing, because of those attacking returns. Yep. But you wouldn't captain him in a week where you got Kane, where you got Salah, Jota, even Lingard. It's just,
realistically, this is a silly game. It's
a silly game. This is the moment where people are throwing toilet roll on there. They were just reading one of the comments here from Chris Smith here. He says, can barely type too much Malbec. So there we go. I think that's probably a fitting way to end. Just want to remind people about the members area where we've got a lot of our stats from, expected stats as well, all Opta-driven data, lots of tools and gadgets in there. Do have a look on the website for more. If you've enjoyed this episode, do press like and remember to subscribe wherever you receive your podcast from, and obviously on our YouTube channel as well. But in the meantime, it's a goodbye from me.
So, goodbye from me.
Goodbye for me.
Goodbye all.